Yeah.
Your scars are the proof, and mine are too. You take broken things and make them new.
Welcome to Scars That Speak, where I ask people questions about the lives that they lived, because all of our scars have stories of hope to tell. And today I am joined by my very first guest and one of my bestest friends, Sarah Stogner. It feels really poetic, actually, that you're my first guest on here, because Sarah, you were one of my first adult friends.
Oh,
so
really?
It wasn't like a friendship that I had known in high school or college, or that I made through family or through another friend. You were the first person that you started going to our church, and then suddenly it was like, hey, we're kind of the same age and we kind of have this similar interest. Would you want to go get coffee together?
Yeah.
And so, and that was also I learned in that season that I'm not very good at making new friends all on my own. And so that was a whole kind of wrestling period. But Sarah was so gracious to me during that time. And I'm so glad that she was, because we've now developed a really, really beautiful friendship.
Yeah.
Sarah is so warm. And she is the best coffee date around. She's only my coffee date. You can't have her, but I do want you to know that she is so much fun on coffee dates. And she's also an incredible musician. She plays in our local symphony here in town and on the music team here at our church. She has 2 cats.
I do.
She has 1 dog. She has a wickedly smart, technologically savvy husband.
It's really good that he uses his powers for good and not evil.
Yes, right. And she has a sweet little baby boy who we're going to talk about, Caleb, and we're going to talk about Simon today. I'm really excited. And,
Yes.
But I think what I love most about Sarah is her tender heart, which I have gotten to know now as we have walked through some really hard seasons together over these last few years since our friendship developed. And I've seen Sarah in real time wrestle with, alongside with me, the pain of waiting for God to do what only He can do. And I'm so excited because today we get to hear about her incredible journey from heartbreak, disappointment, unexpected changes, and all the way to seeing God's plans unfold in the most beautiful of ways. Sarah, how are you feeling?
Great. I'm so glad to be here. I love telling this story,
Yes.
so I'm excited to share.
Yay! Okay, well, let's actually start at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Can you describe for me what having a plan for your life meant for little baby Sarah?
Yeah. So I feel like my generation, kind of growing up in the church, was really, really rooted in legalism. It was really rampant, or at least as a very legalistic teenager, I think I was told a lot that I had wisdom beyond my years, and I wish I had been like you when I was your age and whatever, and not really realizing that internally, my life was rules, and my life was not about it wasn't just about pursuing Jesus for Jesus' sake. It was, I'm going to do all of this stuff to prove to everyone else that I'm pursuing Jesus.
Right.
And so I think kind of having a plan for my life flowed out of that in a lot of ways, of just that it was my job to pick a career that I could justify to everybody else of why it was going to be pleasing to the Lord, the way I was going to use it to advance the kingdom and all of that, instead of actually just seeking the Lord of hey, what would you have me do?
Yeah, and I think we've talked about that too, of both kind of being young teenage leaders in the church, of how I think well-intended those people are when they're you're so gifted, you've obviously got a heart for the Lord and you've got a heart for ministry, but kind of sometimes I think that kind of points to the issue of making sure compliments are more rooted into the fruits of the Spirit and less rooted in our human ability, because that kind of tends to puff us up rather than building us up.
Right. And not mistaking that giftedness for spiritual maturity, for
that's good.
that, oh, well, you've just got it all figured out because you're doing this, and this.
Right.
Man, in my 30s, am I more aware than I ever have been in my life how imperfect and even just unworthy I have been of some of the amazing leadership positions I've gotten to have. I still sit back of like, who
Right.
am I? Who am I that I
Right.
have been asked to do this?
Right. Yeah. So young Sarah, she's kind of feels like she's got things figured out. She's got it all mapped
100%.
out.
100%.
And so then I want you to walk me through the first season in your life when you realized you didn't, which is when you thought you had found your
Yeah.
future husband in
Yeah.
that whole season.
So I had really one very serious relationship before I met my husband.
Yeah.
And that relationship was really like defined by the purity movement.
Yeah.
I had read all of the books, the courtship thing. We had been friends for like 2.5 years before we went on our first date. That's a whole other conversation for a whole other day.
Right.
And we had dated for about 3.5 years. And you know, he was a good guy, but we just weren't a good match.
Yeah.
But I had sat through these sermons that were really geared towards married couples.
Right.
That are talking about, you know, love is hard work, love, you're just supposed to stick it out no matter what, and all
Right.
this stuff. And I copied and pasted that into my dating relationship, my high school sweetheart. And that was not, I don't think anybody's intention, but that was just, I just thought that was what you did.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I wouldn't have said this out loud at the time, but I think I really had just convinced myself that if I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do, that I would get this result.
Right.
And I
Right.
think at the time it was really held in esteem to marry the first person that you dated, to like have not like given yourself away to somebody that you wasn't going to become your spouse.
Right.
And so I just really had my eyes set on, yeah, this is it. This is the guy.
Right.
I've said that I love him. Like
I put in the work,
we're committed.
the dedication.
I've done it X, Y, and Z. We've
Yeah.
followed every letter of every dating
Right.
book that was
All the
popular.
rules.
Yeah, all the rules. And so really by the end of it, I can remember I just refused to talk to the Lord about it. Because I think I knew in my gut that it wasn't right and it wasn't going to work out.
Right.
And I just knew the answer of that conversation. And so I just really like held it here.
Yeah.
And finally, like, he just got cold feet and broke up with me kind of seemingly out of nowhere in the middle of our junior year of college. And I have this really distinct memory of just like weeping on my bathroom floor and just really hearing the Lord say, like, you just can't keep this from me.
Yeah.
And that was kind of one of the first things that shook the foundation of that legalistic background of just,
Yeah.
because it was really the first time that I'd had to deal with any kind of public mistake.
Wow.
Because anybody who knew me at the time knew I was very convinced I was going to marry this
Right.
person.
Right.
And the decision kind of got made without me.
Yeah.
And so I just had to deal with it. And it was also the first time in my life that I didn't feel worthy of my standing. Like, and the
Yeah.
Lord was just really sweet to remind me that, like, yeah, Sarah, you've never been worthy. That's never been a thing. You may
Right.
have felt that way, but that's
Right.
always been true. You've
Just
never,
because something looks good on the outside doesn't mean on the inside
yeah.
it's where he wants it to be.
Yeah, and I had really placed my confidence to come before him in prayer and in worship as my ability to follow all of my own rules.
Right.
And not on the finished work of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, so then, you know, that relationship again that kind of looked really pretty on the outside and
Yeah.
on paper,
Yeah.
in reality just wasn't, and so it ended up ending.
Yeah.
So then walk us through Caleb, who we know now
Yes.
is the amazing husband that is
Yes.
with you
Yes.
and is married to you, and talk to us about how finding Caleb helped kind of change your perspective on trusting God's timing
Yeah.
and his plans.
I just love that season because the Lord is so funny. Because like I said before, that old relationship was really like defined by rules, defined by me just hanging on for
Yeah.
dear life and just like, I'm gonna make it no matter what. And the Lord just really wrote the beginnings of Caleb's and my relationship like almost polar opposite. Like almost like you could go by line and how they were different.
Like, wow.
Because I really felt pretty insecure at the beginning of that relationship, just not because of him. I knew how he felt about me, but I didn't trust how I felt. I was a little bit worried that I was just wanting to fill that like spot in my life and not that I wanted him. And I knew he was a good guy and didn't deserve that. So I felt a lot of pressure to like figure that out. And so there was a lot of times, and not to mention, it was just a year from the breakup. It wasn't that long.
Right.
And and I just wasn't like spiritually as confident as I had been. Like there's just a lot of things in my life that just didn't look how I thought they were gonna look. And again, the books that I read and all that said, like, you know, you should have a rock solid relationship with the Lord that you are confident in before you start like looking at a helpmate and all this stuff. And so it just, the onset of it just didn't look how I wanted it to or how I expected it to. And I just kept handing that relationship back to the Lord, like over and over, of just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. This feels like it's too much too soon. And like, and it just felt like over and over, the Lord just kept handing it back. He was like, no, I think you're going to like this one.
Right.
No, I want you to hang on for a little.
Right.
Like, and just, so where I had like held on and refused to talk about it before, it was like, I couldn't stop handing it back. And he just kept handing it back to me.
Yeah.
Which was, so sweet. And I think also at the root of it, I just knew I didn't deserve it. That it wasn't because of anything I had done. It wasn't something I had earned. Yeah. And it was really the first time in my life that I had a really close encounter with like the grace of God. And that his good gifts really have nothing to do with me. Right. He gives good gifts because he's a good God. Yeah. Not because I did X, Y, and Z. He's not a vending machine that if I put in obedience and made up rules and whatever, that I then get back. Exactly. Blessing, no, he just blesses because that's who he is. Right.
Yeah, and I think like what I love about that story is like in the beginning, it sounds like, you know, to you, it looked like your life was beautiful. It was perfect. It was exactly where it needed to be. And what actually ended up being the fruit of that was mess. Yeah. And then in your mess, that instead of trying to submit this beautiful, perfect plan or this perfect life that you thought you had, you submitted your mess to him. You submitted your confusion to him. And what you got back was beauty from ashes. Yeah. You got blessing. You got the Lord's hand and guidance, and he brought you to the person that you were supposed to get to, which is obviously.
And we both have talked about too, Caleb and I both, that like we both experienced some heartache before we found each other, and there was so much about what we experienced before that informed like us knowing what we had when we had it. Yeah. Which is such a gift too, of just like, hey, I know that this is not always a thing, and I'm so grateful for it. Right. And the way that the Lord just wrote us together and how we work, it's just not even something I would have known to ask for so much of it. That it's only he could have done it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, like what's so fun to reflect on too is that having Caleb as your spouse, I think was really instrumental in helping you get through another really difficult season that came shortly after that, which is, you know, some of the experiences, the church hurt that you ended up having. Yeah. He was really instrumental in helping you get past that. So how did experiencing church hurt and disappointment impact your faith and impact?
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about recently as I was kind of pondering these questions is shortly after having to make the decision to leave my home church, which at that point, it was the single most difficult thing that had happened in my life. Yeah. And
because you went there your whole life.
Yeah, from kindergarten through about
mid-20s.
Yeah, mid-20s. Yeah. And very much was an idol in a lot of my view, and I really believed that they just did everything right. That I just had such a high opinion of them. Yeah. And honestly, still do. But it's just, you know, things happen, and. Kind of following that season, I had this just really overwhelming like feeling of like deja vu, where I realized I was feeling like rejected and confused and heartbroken, and I remember just kind of thinking like, I've felt this way before. Like I've experienced these emotions before. Right. And I'll never forget, I was like in my car and the Lord just like struck me like between the eyes of like, remember? Yeah. And it was exactly how I felt when he had taken that relationship out of my hands. It was those kinds of feelings. And he took that moment, it almost just felt like a sunrise, that he was like, and remember that Caleb was just like, was coming a year later. Like, remember what was coming when I took that out of your hands. Yeah. And I think the Lord is just so sweet of like, and it wasn't like a, how dare you doubt me kind of feeling. It was just a, like, just trust,
little faith.
Like, just trust me that good is coming. Yeah. Like, remember how it didn't feel like anything like that could have been on the horizon, and it was, and it wasn't that far. And I really like white knuckled to that promise.
Yeah.
That though it didn't make sense, though I didn't understand it, though it was really painful, that that the Lord had something at work.
Right.
And just that something good was gonna come of it.
Yeah.
That good was gonna come.
That he does bring beauty
Yeah.
from ashes.
Yeah.
Over and over and over and over again. Because I remember, is it true, am I remembering it correctly, that you were kind of really nervous about visiting new churches after spending a little bit of time?
Yeah.
And was Caleb the one that was am I misremembering that?
No, you remember
Okay.
right. I wouldn't say I was nervous, I'd say I was burnt out. Because I had really extended myself.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was going to get this job at my
Right.
old church at the end of it. And whenever that didn't work out, it felt like, at that point, it was like 4 or 5 months of work that I poured into this place.
Yeah.
And it felt like all of it just really like hit me like a freight train all at once. And I just was tired.
Yeah.
And I couldn't even speak a couple of sentences about it without just weeping.
Right.
Like I just was so emotionally charged over
Yeah.
it for a long time. So yeah, there was the first week after we had finished up at my old church, and we're kind of moving towards, and we had a plan. We were going to come here to C3,
Yeah.
and honestly, that decision was made out of what church in town do I know the least number of people at that are
Right.
the least likely to ask me what I'm doing there,
Right.
because
Right.
that was like a terrifying question to me. And I looked at Caleb and I was just like, do we have to go? And him being very, I think, informed by the Holy Spirit in that moment,
Yeah.
said, I think it's important that we do, because if we take a break, how long is that
Right.
going to last?
When are we going to go back?
And then a few weeks later, because we kind of kept going at C3, and I wish that I could say that like we got there and like everything was good and like, yeah, this is where we're supposed to be.
Right.
And it just wasn't. And again, the Lord was really sweet to give some droplets. There was a new campus that was about to be built that was a church I knew
Yeah.
and had a long history with.
Right.
There's absolutely we saw like there was a spot for us in this church,
Right.
like a place that we absolutely fit in, but it didn't feel like it was where we were supposed to be for a long time.
Yeah.
For really months and months. And so after we had been for a couple of weeks, I remember sitting down to dinner with Caleb, and we were talking about like, okay, well, we've been to C3 for a couple times. Do we want to start looking at other places? And he was like, again, I think really informed by the Holy Spirit, he said, I don't think it's wise for us to be in a church shopping season right now. I think we stay here until we feel like we have a reason to leave.
Yeah.
Which in hindsight, I think was really, really wise.
Yeah.
Because yeah, we would have just been disconnected that much longer.
Right.
And as painful as it was to put ourselves back out there and to try to trust a church again and all of that,
Yeah.
it was really important that we didn't let that
Right.
sever us from the body for any
Exactly.
length of time, because I think that ultimately would have only made it
Yeah.
worse.
Good old Caleb.
Yeah. God bless him.
Yeah. So I wish I could remember too the timeline of when we first started getting coffee together.
It was early. I think it was even, because I remember so that spring we were working on getting the new campus ready, and I went to
Yeah.
one of those work days, and you invited me to the table with like everybody else because I didn't know anybody. And I want to say it was like within a week or two after that you invited me to coffee the first time.
Okay.
Because I remembered sharing some of that with you
Yeah.
pretty early.
And my conversational skills were pretty bad. Right?
I think I didn't know you well enough then to realize they were bad.
Right. Well, that's good, I guess.
You were still like projecting, I think,
Yeah.
the confident worship leader vibe. So it didn't like stick out to me. I'm just like, yet. But I also say, I think we went to coffee that one time, and it was probably a solid year before we got coffee again.
Yes. Yeah. And then I remember we got coffee a couple of times, and then it was just, like I said, like I realized in that season that I'm really not very good at making new friends on my own, because I personally struggle a lot with feeling comfortable with just like being myself around new people. And I don't know what it was. I just remember we had a coffee date, and I left that coffee date like knowing like, if I don't say something to Sarah, I don't think we're gonna get another coffee date, and I don't think we're gonna be friends. And so I remembered texting you and being like, thank you so much for continuously saying yes to these coffee dates when I know that like I'm not giving my best work at these coffee dates. And I was just honest with her. Like I just told her like, this is really hard for me. I have a really hard time like feeling secure in my own like personality and in my own quirks and everything. And so I was like please just don't give up on me. Like please keep coming to coffee. And Sarah, again, just in her warm and gentle spirit, was like, absolutely, I will keep coming to go. But I think I remember too you saying something like, thank you for saying that to me.
Yeah, because my empath really like reads into undercurrents.
Yeah.
And so I think I read into your just general discomfort as you're forcing a relationship. Like you're trying to be nice to me, but you don't actually really want to be my friend.
Right.
Which, and I didn't have any hurt feelings over it, but I just was going to let that go.
Right,
of just
exactly.
like, I'm not going to force her to hang out with me if that's just not, if this isn't it.
Exactly.
And so I was so grateful that you expressed that, because I was like, I can adjust.
Right.
Like I can blow
I can
past
adjust my expectations.
Well, and just like, I can ignore that because I just didn't know that about you. I knew very little of your story back then and ways that you cope and all of that stuff. And I just was, I feel like in a lot of ways our friendship is so sweet because our backgrounds are so different. Yeah. That we really have had to be patient with each other and sometimes over communicate of just, hey, like I kind of need this from you. Exactly. When this happens, and you've taught me so much of how to be a good friend in that way that I'm just so grateful for, that you've always just given me the chance to communicate to me so that I can adjust. Yeah. And that I'm not inadvertently hurting your feelings and have no idea because you never told me.
Exactly. Exactly. And I remember, I think too, because we became friends, and then it was shortly after that, I didn't realize how long you guys had been trying, but shortly after that, you started saying little things here and there, like, this is taking a lot longer than we thought. Yeah. And you started going to these appointments. And I remember one time I don't think we had gone out to get coffee, but we were definitely together. And I can't remember what you said, but I remember like looking at you and saying like, Sarah, like, that this isn't your fault. Yeah. Right? Oh man, I forgot that you said that. And I think that was one of the first times that we really like just cried together, because again, like we'd become friends and I started hearing these little things here and there, but I don't think either of us really realized how much it was starting to impact you. Yeah. Personally, spiritually, emotionally, until like that time. So what was the hardest part of facing infertility and that waiting season? Yeah, so, because I went off the pill in the summer of 2019, if I remember right. And I think it was like the fall of 2021 when we went to the first doctor to start seeing if everything was fine. And honestly, the frustrating part was that we just couldn't ever get a straight answer of what was going on. Yeah. It was just kind of over and over, well, everything looks fine. Well, everything looks fine. And so that in and of itself was just kind of frustrating. No clarity. Yeah, and then we ended up agreeing to do the surgery that was kind of exploratory. And, and I just really had this good feeling about it, that it was going to yield answers, and it just didn't. It really just kind of confirmed what we already knew, which was just that everything seemed to be fine. Yeah. And the thing about infertility is it just doesn't get easier to talk about. Yeah. It's not really something that you can just kind of sit on and keep to yourself, and eventually you'll just stop crying about it, because it just doesn't work that way. And so I think a lot of people in my life didn't realize how painful it was and how long it had been going on. Because as I'm doing now, I just couldn't talk about it without weeping. And like most people, that's really embarrassing, and you hate to be that person who just cries. And just unloads it on somebody. Yeah. And so, I really just internalized it a lot, because I think I also just didn't know what to even ask prayer for, because everything was fine, and they kept saying, as the doctors were saying, like everything was just fine, and I
had known since my early 20s that I really fostering or adoption as a
Yeah.
way to grow our family was really like not a plan B to me. It was very
Right.
much always a plan.
Yeah.
And that was really an underlying frustration for me too, because honestly, in some ways, I was ready to just accept like, yeah, it's just not going to happen, because then we could have just pivoted.
Yeah.
And it felt like over and over the Lord was just like, not yet, just not yet. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think as Christians, and especially for me growing up in the church, like it was never about not knowing that the Lord could do it.
Right.
That really wasn't it for me. Like
Right.
it wasn't a lack of faith in that, like I just don't believe that he could do this. Like
Right.
especially like intellectually,
He's-
like
he's powerful.
Yeah,
He
like
is
I'm-
God.
if he wanted me to be pregnant, I would be currently. Like, and in some ways that's a different tension to hold.
Yeah.
Is knowing
he
that he
can.
could, but ultimately not knowing
if he will.
if he will, and really holding that tension of, and I want to accept whatever your will is,
Yeah.
because I know by this point in my life that your will is better, even when I don't understand it, even when it's painful. And I've learned that through other seasons of my life, but I want to accept it here, but it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And we shared a lot of
Man.
days when you would just cry and I would just be like, dude, I can't fix this, but like I'm here with you in it.
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere. I can't really help you here. But
I still remember one of the sweetest things I think you said to me in that season was, I just wish this could be different.
yeah. Yeah. And I meant it. So you did end up being able to, because I remember that procedure sort of turned you away, I think, from medical interventions because
Yes.
it didn't yield those results.
Right.
And so then you sort of for a little while pivoted to, I think, not just going to, but you know, you're going to pivot to
Yeah.
adoption.
Yeah.
But then somewhere along there too, you had decided, you know what? I think the medical intervention route actually is the way for now, although you still plan on adopting
Right.
later down the road.
Yeah, so starting back in the pandemic in 2020, Caleb ended up working full-time from home.
Yeah.
Which, when we bought our first house, was not even sort of on the horizon. And we kind of realized towards the beginning of 2023 that, hey, since Caleb works from home full-time, we actually really don't have space to put a kid if we had one.
Right.
And so we started to look for a new house, and I can honestly say that a baby was not a part of that conversation at all. Like maybe like 1% to 2%. Like as just like, this could happen.
Right.
It probably won't, but it could happen.
Right.
But like when we were shopping for a house, my focus was 100% of, is this a foster care friendly environment?
Right.
Could I imagine fostering kids in this house? And we closed on that house in May. Right around that time is whenever we found out that you and Josh were expecting. And for whatever reason, it really kind of hit Caleb and I between the eyes in a way we just weren't expecting to, because we were so happy for you, but
Yeah.
it just really awakened that ache in both
Yeah.
of us. And I think we both just kind of realized, like, I don't know that we've given this a fair shake.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that we're gonna feel regret if we don't.
Right. Try to see it all the way through.
Yeah, because I had known all along that IVF was not something I wanted to pursue.
Yeah.
But there's kind of a halfway in between.
Right.
Called IUI that's a little less invasive, a little bit,
Right.
a lot less expensive. And just for me, knowing that also I wanted to foster adopt, I kind of had a limit of how much monetary
Right.
investment I wanted to put towards
Into
conceiving biologically.
Yeah.
And also emotionally, that was just important for me to have a boundary of, this is as far as it goes.
Yeah.
That we're not just going to sit
Yeah.
in this for years and years and sink hundreds of thousands of dollars
Right.
because we're just I didn't want to live that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, so about then is when we decided, okay, let's go back. Let's look up because one thing we hadn't been to at that point was an infertility clinic. We had
Right.
seen a very well thought of doctor
Right.
but we hadn't been to an infertility clinic. That was
Who like specializes in
yeah, it was an entirely different experience.
Right.
But even then, I wouldn't say that the Lord gave me peace through it, but it wasn't the kind of peace that I was just certain it was gonna yield a baby.
Yeah.
Because my headspace in it, I was very much steeling myself to, I want to accept whatever the Lord's will is.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to put my eggs all in one basket of that. I think he is sending us this direction because we're going to get a baby and we're going to get pregnant at the end of it. That wasn't the way that I felt convicted. Whether that was fear or actual like spiritual leading, I don't know. That's just where we were.
And that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes.
Yeah, and it just, for my own mental health, that felt like the space I just needed to hold.
Yeah.
Was just that the goal was closure.
Yeah.
Whether that was a baby, praise God,
Yeah.
or whether that was, well, we gave it a fair shake.
Yeah.
And we took it as far as we felt convicted to take it, and the Lord said no.
Yeah. So then I remember towards the end of my pregnancy, you know, you were talking about this infertility clinic, and I ended up going into labor, you know, had the baby. You and Caleb were the first person to come over.
Well, because you told me to lead to put together your meal train. I was like, well, I get the first spot, obviously.
First dibs. And I remember you walking through the door, and as soon as you walked in, I was like, I want to ask her if she's pregnant so bad. And there's something really beautiful that I feel like I have to share, is that like on that same couch several months before, you and Caleb had sat down with us and was like, I think we're going to pursue the adoption route.
Yeah.
And we prayed with you and we wept with you.
I think it was even in January of that year.
Yeah.
And we're talking in December, like
Exactly.
literally bookends of that year.
Exactly. And so then in December, we're sitting on that same couch, and I just look at you and I'm like, Sarah, what are the results? And obviously you started crying and you were like,
I'm pregnant.
we're pregnant. It was just so fun. It was so fun. So what was it like to experience God's faithfulness through the pregnancy? And
Well, one thing I
everything?
want to touch on especially is, like I said, like it never got easier to talk about infertility. It never got easier to let people in. But one thing that I kind of chose to do differently that fall, because it kind of started, I think we had our intake appointment sometime in September, follow-ups in October, first round of IUI in November. That's kind of the timeline of it. And the Lord, being so sweet and sovereign, put kind of our first follow-up appointment, I guess, following a conference that all of leadership team and staff and wives went to. It was like that Monday after the fact. And so I was emotionally vulnerable anyway. So I had told some people on that retreat, hey, we have this follow-up where we'll kind of get the results of where we're at this Monday at like 11 or whatever it was. And probably 6 people texted us that Monday just saying, hey, thinking about you, rooting for you, praying for you, that kind of thing. But it felt like an army, you know, like it just felt, oh my gosh, it felt so sweet for people to put it in their phone and remember and just to feel like we had our village behind us was so sweet. Yeah. And so after that day, I was like, well, I'm telling all of these people every appointment from here on out because I just really didn't know how it was going to end up and what my state was going to be at the end of it. So it was really, it felt like such a leg up to have even a small central group that was praying for us and was in it with us. And so that was such a sweet picture of the Lord's faithfulness, using his church in our village that just were absolutely rooting for us and thinking about us and praying for us and supporting us. And I can honestly say that I experienced some peace that passed understanding through that, because I can remember kind of the way that it goes is you go through a couple of appointments, then the actual procedure gets done, and then you wait like, I think a week and a half, and you go in for not 1, but 2 pregnancy tests. Right. And they don't tell you anything after the first, they wait till after the second. And And I really expected to just be riddled with anxiety that week of the pregnancy test specifically. But I really did have just this feeling that like, the Lord's got this.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. I don't claim to know what that means, but he's got it and he's got us, which was really, really very sweet. And then of course, getting to find out that we were in fact expecting, I can remember I was on the phone with a good friend and had hung up with her and picked up the phone for the clinic, and she told me that I was pregnant, and I swear I blacked out.
I don't remember a thing.
Because
oh man,
well, because she didn't even say that I was pregnant. I had known what the results needed to be for me to be pregnant, so she just told me the results, and I said, I'm pregnant? And she goes, yeah. And I just immediately like beelined up the stairs to where Caleb's office is upstairs. Bless him. I think he thought something was wrong, and I was like scream whispering, like, I'm pregnant. while this sweet lady on the phone is trying to tell me about next steps and when my next appointment needs to be. And so I can remember like hugging Caleb and like blinking and be like, I'm so sorry. I didn't hear anything that you just said.
Can you just back up just a little bit?
Can you tell me all of that again? Yeah, that was just a sweet moment I'll never forget. And that was the day that you and Josh came home from the hospital with Elias. And of course I told Caleb, I was like, well, I have to call Kristen back because she literally knows why I got off the phone. She knows that I know one way or the other. So I got to call them, and then I was like, can we please tell Josh and Abby? Can we please tell Josh and Abby? I was like, I can't see Abby and not tell her. And he was like, I mean, if it comes up, and I was like,
you know it's gonna come.
And I conveniently dropped, because you guys were kind of loopy and tired.
Oh, gross.
But I kind of conveniently dropped that, like, I had like timed some casserole things from my trip back to Tulsa, and it was like something like clicked in your brain. You're like, oh, what? When do you know the results?
Yes, I was like, how did I word it? Because I know I didn't just outright be like, you know, are you pregnant? But I remembered I was like, I worded it kind of sneakily because I didn't want to
I think
cry.
I think you said, when do you find out the results or something like that.
Yes.
And that was my opening, and you better believe that I took it. But the other thing that was so sweet, and I think just a really sweet picture of the Lord's heart towards us as we walk through things like that. Because I expected people to be excited for us. Like, I expected that. I expected, like, shrieks and clapping and smiling and hugs and all of that. But I was not prepared for the number of people who would weep.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about, like, a couple. Like, especially the crew that was praying for us wept with joy when I told them that we were expecting Simon. And I think it just really, like, painted in my heart of just, like, these are not just friends who prayed for us. These are not just friends who empathized with us or, you know, walked on. These are friends that longed for this with us. Yeah. And I can remember especially two friends, Brandon and Robin, sitting around my kitchen table, and just this sweet, like, none of us knew, like, felt like a strong conviction of how it was going to work out. But just this just honest pleading with the Lord of just, man. Yeah. We
hope it does.
Yeah. And I love that the Lord makes space for that. Yeah. That we can have the posture of, you know, your will and not mine, but man, if it could be mine this time. And I think we have that example in Jesus of, you know, if there's any way, let this cup pass from me. Yeah. Like, we don't see Jesus be like, I got this. Like, that there's still that longing of just, I submit to your will, but not because I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, exactly.
But because you're God. Yeah. And I submit it to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you could sum up the difference between your plan and God's plan in one sentence. Yeah. I mean, I know you might have to stew on that a little bit, but yeah, what would it be, really?
I think my plan is comfortable and his plan is better.
Yeah. That's good. So what encouragement then would you offer to someone struggling to trust that God's plan is better?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, first of all, just to know, like, one, he knows how you're feeling, so just talk to him about it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't expect you to know what he knows.
Right.
And to have the perspective that he does. One thing that I found really helpful to me, actually the summer after we left my childhood church, my mom and I did the Beth Moore study in Daniel. And
Oh, yeah.
because I remember then I just was really hung up with the why. Because to me, it felt unfair. It felt like, if the Lord was really calling us away from this church, that he could have just called us away. It didn't have to be so painful. It didn't have to be so messy. And one of the things that Beth pointed out in her study was there's a part in Daniel when all the young men from Israel are just taken to Babylon.
Yeah.
And we know as 21st century Christians that like some of the most amazing stories in the Bible come as a result of that. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego,
Right.
Daniel in the lion's den, things like that. But to those families that lost their young men to Babylon,
Right.
that's it.
Right.
That's all they got to know this side of heaven.
Yeah.
And it really, really gave me some perspective of just sometimes you just don't get to know.
Yeah.
And it encouraged me to get comfortable with, I need to not be so like dissatisfied with not getting to know, because I may just not get to know.
Right.
Like I can let it drive me insane or I can let it go.
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think another thing I took from a lot of these seasons is that two things can be true. You can trust that the Lord's will is good and better and be so frustrated by it.
Right.
and not understand and be hurt by it.
Right.
And those can both be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think I really misunderstood for a long time that stepping out in faith just meant that you had this confidence about what you were going to do, and that and the Lord has just laid it all out for you and just opened every door. And I can say there have been seasons in my life that the will of God has looked like that.
Yeah.
Where it's just unmistakable, He's just laid it out, leveled mountains, and just made it so clear what I'm supposed to do. And there have been seasons in my life that figuring out the will of the Lord has looked like, is this door unlocked?
Right.
Is this door unlocked?
Right.
And sometimes the call and the promise, like what he gave me of knowing that something good was coming whenever we were changing churches, is what you just hang on to, of just but I know that he's good.
Right.
And I know that he's gonna work this out somehow.
Yeah.
And even though all this other stuff doesn't look how I want it to, I still believe that.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. A worship song that I listened to, I can't remember who sings it or what it's called now, but there's a lyric that's really striking. It says, sometimes faith is climbing over a mountain that stayed.
Yeah.
And I think that, even pointing to the story that you brought up about Jesus as he's praying in Gethsemane, and he does say, Lord, if this cup can pass from me, if I do not have to drink from this cup,
by all means.
I would be totally fine with that. Yet, not as I will, but as you will. And of course, we know that it was the Father's will to crush Jesus for our salvation. And what we know now is that Jesus is seated at the right hand of the Father, and he is experiencing blessing upon blessing upon blessing. And I think that just kind of encourages me. Your story and the story of Jesus reminds me that on the other side of this really large mountain that we wish would have moved, but for whatever reason, for the Lord's will, it just didn't. There is blessing on the other side.
Yeah.
And I think looking at your story, having that relationship fail, you were able to find Caleb, and having that relationship with your church fail, you were able to find a new church community. And then even in that infertility, I feel like maybe C3 didn't feel like home, and then maybe that realization didn't hit until you had C3 with you, that amazing church community just rallying behind you and cheering you guys on and crying with you guys. And And now not only do you have community, and not only do you have Caleb, but you have Simon.
Yeah.
And just more blessings probably than you even know what to do with anymore, after a lot of struggle and a lot of heartache. But the Lord's will is better. And I hope that this episode today encourages you to lean into the Lord no matter how hard, even if that mountain stays. And I hope Scars That Speak also encourages you to listen to your friends' stories and to tune your ear towards the stories of hope that each of their scars have to tell. Thanks for listening today, guys, and thank you for joining, Sarah.
Of course. Happy to.